Good morning, Brazil. Good afternoon in Europe, and good evening, Asia. Welcome to our first webinar of a series of P&I clubs. We are very grateful for the support of Maersk Group, the Navy, Brazilian Navy, and the Standard P&I Club. They made this webinar possible, and we will share with you for 1 hour and a half the updated developments of the green shipping and pollution. Sustainability is key, and we cannot deny that the climate is changing our world. I would also like to introduce myself. I am Camila Mendes Vianna Cardoso, partner of Kincaid law firm, and we are organizing this first webinar. And our next speaker will be Commander Wellington Nogueira Camacho. He is the legal advisor of the Directorate of Ports and Coasts, DPC. DPC belongs to the Brazilian Navy, and they are responsible for all the fines related to pollution and also to issue many rules related to green shipping requirements for vessels to operate in Brazil. Mr. Wellington Nogueira has a master's degree in international maritime law by the International Maritime Law Institute of Malta. He also has post-graduation in naval science by the Navy War College in England. He is also post-graduated in hydrographic and navigation, DHN of Rio de Janeiro, and environmental law by the PUC, Pontifícia Universidade Católica of Rio de Janeiro. Please, Commander Wellington Nogueira Camacho, the floor is yours. We would like to hear you. Thank you.
Okay. That's good. Dr. Camila, Edward, and Maria, congratulations, Maria, for your presentation. I am delighted to take a part of this webinar, and thank you, Dr. Camila, for the invitation. And on behalf of her, I would like to show my greetings for those who are watching our conference right now. Green shipping and prevention pollution are concerned, as IMO as highlighted by the Secretary General, Atkins, in his World Maritime Day messaging concerning sustainable shipping for a sustainable planet, in which shipping remains the leading facilitator of the global economy, carrying more than 80% of global trade. So looking at the picture, the question arises, what should we do to have a green and sustainable shipping preventing marine pollution? The case of the great amount of oil spilled in northeast coast side of Brazil leads us to an important reflection and learning when we will be speaking about lessons learned at the end. In this first slide, we can see personnel of the Navy cleaning the beach at the Barra de São Miguel on 8 November 2019 in the state of Alagoas. Next slide, please. Here, the first record of oil that polluted Brazilian Northeast took place on 2 September 2019 in Paraíba State in a very small quantities that did not justify the triggering of National Contingency Plan for Oil Spill at that time. It's the question that always arises. And the second most recent point that the oil reached in the north occurred in strategic reserve of Cururupu in Maranhão State on 5 October 2019, and the Filter South, São João da Barra, Rio de Janeiro State on 1 December. The oil spills have an extension of 3,600 kilometers and reached 1,009 places, 130 cities, 11 states, and also 5.3 million tons of waste were recovered.
Indeed, it was an unprecedented incident in length and duration. Next slide, please. Uh, the National Oil Spill Contingency Plan was activated, and it had the following structure, as we can see here, and structure executive committee left and above, composed by NAVE, Brazilian NAVE, National Agents of Petroleum, and IBAMA agents as well. And the middle, we have a main authority, the National Authority, Ministry of Environment, and the right side, monitoring and evaluation group, hereinafter referred as to GAA, and operational coordinator and support committee as well, with so many agents of Brazil. Next slide, please. These are the institutions that took part of the National Contingency Plan supporting Brazil to respond the oil spilled in such case. We can see Navy, Army, Air Force, Federal Policy, and so on. Next slide, please. GAA coordination runs for naval district, as we can see on the screen. Commands 4DN, 3DN, 2 and 1, because the dimension of the oil spilled. Next slide, please. Here we can see some pictures of monitoring and cleaning of areas carried out by armed forces, Navy and Army here. Next slide. And civil defense, armed and Navy had expressive participation in personal and material resources, as we can see at the picture. The Navy had 1,200 personnel and 30 ships and 16 aircrafts. Next slide. It was created the Scientific Coordination Group by GAA in course of the actions carried out in response to the oil spills in order to act on 7 working groups to relieve the damage over the environment. They were numerical modeling, GT1, biotic and abiotic factors, 2, social economies impacts, and protect environment areas, beaches, mangroves, and reefs. These issues were studied by 135 researchers belonging to 47 institutions in order to determine the environment impact result from the oil spill. In addition, assisting the investigation of the origin of the oil spill. Dr. Ricardo Coutinho, professor and researcher at the Brazilian Navy, was appointed to lead the scientific coordination. Next slide, please. And here, the participate institutions, these are in response and analysis of the oil collected on the beaches of the Brazilian coast. Next slide. GAA was divided the coast in 3 important areas according to the percentage of the oil that reached the coast. So we have area 1 in Northeast, from Rio Grande do Norte to Alagoas, and inside for Commander District, area 1 and 3 below the Northeast. So next slide, please. To establish the point where the oil was spilled and to figure out an area in which the ships would probably pass through, some factors such as wind, current, and oil density were taken into account to perform the numerical modeling of the spill. And in view of this, to verify which ships transited close to that point, and finally to discover the responsible for the pollution. It would be like playing the movie from the end to the beginning. Thus, From the moment that the oil first touched the Brazilian coast, the modeling would provide to us a likely date and place where the pollution took place initially. And from there, to look for the possible polluter. Due of such equatorial current, it is possible to note that the most affected area was one, as we just saw on the last slide. Next slide, please. The winds come from east, are more intense in the northeast, and push the body of water toward the coast. We can see in the recent case, and even given the effect of the wind on the side of the ship, it's very strong. And please, next slide. This figure is very common to all of us. It shows the modification and dispersation in water, and so move on. Please, next slide. In our case, it was a Venezuelan heavy oil of density 4, the red line. Thus, the oil traveled submerged due to its way until it reached our beach in Paraíba on 2 September 2019, as said before. Next slide, please. Samples were collected and submitted to analysis in many different institutions in Brazil and also in abroad. We can see many in Norway, 8 samples were sent to them. And next slide, please. In the research areas, from 1 July to 30 August, 1,060 tankers, oil tankers, were identified, by the Brazilian Maritime Traffic Information System, SISTRA. But due to the simulation of numeric modeling, it was possible to reach a smaller area, and that number was significantly reduced. Next slide, please. And this the area of search. Running the film backward, as I said before, we reach this area of 390 nautical miles per 260 nautical miles. Mendes represent about 720 kilometers per 487 kilometers. Next area, please. Excuse me, next slide. And now we have lessons learned. In respect to this, working together with other agents was a very huge and good experience for us. Staff training, oil analysis, and oil dispersion modeling as well, with respect to our coordinations and researchers, and it was very important for us. And amendments in the legal framework related to pollution at sea, IMO and UNCLOS, are necessary, as will be analyzed ahead, and need to expand the monitoring on Blue Amazon, SysGuys. And what is SysGuys? The Blue Amazon Management System, SysGuys, has the mission of monitoring in a continuous and integrated way the Brazilian jurisdictional waters and the international areas of Brazilian responsibility for carrying out, when necessary, search and rescue operations. When implemented, SysGuys will integrate a network of territorial and marine sensors, command and control centers, aerial and environment monitoring, in order to provide the capability to control strategic mobility in areas and prompt response in event of threat, emergency, environment disaster, aggressions, or illegality. Next slide, please. This is the best part, internalization of international conventions. The proposal to join the CLC 1992 convention by a session was forwarded to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, according to the Navy Office on 22 January of 2021, this year at the beginning. On the other hand, our proposal to accession, next please. Yes, the proposal to accession of 92 Fund Convention will be sent after we had achieved the success at CLC 92. Our experience in submitting more than one convention for ratification at the same time has not been good. Next slide, please. There is a sense, this is the most important slide that I would like to present to you. There is a sense of impunity on high seas, where crimes may occur and not be punished, and especially when the victims are third states, whose action directly affects their collectivity as well as the marine environment. And in such case, the polluter committed an environment crime according to Brazilian rules, and if identified, should compensate aforesaid victims for civil damage result from his conduct. So what is necessary to do? The question comes. First of all, we have made amendments in our standard of maritime authority, Norman 8/DPC, in order to enforce the ships are sailing through the search and rescue area to be accompanied by Brazilian Maritime Traffic Information System, as I said before. In second place, we have been suggesting amendments in main international conventions pursuing the same goals. Many ships usually turn off. What do you see in the last in such case? Many ships usually turn off the automatic identification system, AIS, which work within a range of VHF communications and also do not emit the long-range identification system tracking, LRIT, signal to inform their position. They are the dark ships in our conception. In respect to the UNCLOS convention, we believe that amendments to UNCLOS will be more difficult, but the convention failed in Article 198 because the polluter did not report that his action would result in a pollution to third state. Choose articles such as 56 and 86 must be modified to include the obligation highlighted before. The SAR Convention only invites the states part to voluntarily be accompanied by the tracking system of the signatory states. And the SOLAS Convention shows that the state part should have the right to receive the position of a vessel up to 1,000 miles from the coast. However, between having the right and the ship having the obligation, there is a big difference. The fact that the ship do not comply with this legal provision. And also MARPOL Convention highlight that the obligation for the ships to report the oil pollution accident to the coastal states. In this present case, it has not took place. However, there is no obligation for such ship to inform its positions to a tracking system, either or in exclusive economic zone, EEZ, or within the SAR area, search and rescue. And finally, the Intervention Convention on High Seas, Brazil is part of such convention. However, the fact that the polluter did not report the leak to the Brazilian authorities did not allow Brazil to carry out the convention and establish the national contingency plan since the beginning of the casualty, due to the large amount of oil spilled by the dark ship. In other words, the convention failed and was useless for Brazil, and it had no useful effect tools, it is very important that it may be amended. Our proposals are meeting the objectives of the IMO for sustainable shipping for a sustainable planet, striving for green shipping as well as preventing the pollution of the seas. Next slide, please. The sections scheduled for MSC and APC for these years are listed below. More one, please. We had at the end of 2020 MSC, and we had started our proposal. And next slide, please. The sections scheduled for the MSC and APC for this in the next years are listed below, as you can see here, no? And so that if we get any change to the conventions, this will only take place in 2023, as you can see on the right, MSC 105. Next slide, please. And for the intervention convention on the high seas, it's possible that we will have amendments in 2022. Next slide. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much, Commander Nogueira. It was very interesting. This was a very sad incident in Brazilian waters, one of the highest pollution in our country. And the worst is that it's not possible to identify so far the vessel that did this kind of pollution. I know it's still under investigations, but one of the points that was made in the press is that it's also possible that we have like a ghost vessels in our seas in the world that cannot be identified, which I think brings a question for the whole community. How can a vessel without being identified make such a kind of pollution that impacts many people and destroy our oceans? But I have some questions for you, but later on when we finish the presentations. And then we are going to the debates. Our next speaker is Edward Atkins. Edward is an underwriting director at the Standard P&I Club. He joined Standard in 2011, 5 years working as underwriting the European division. And from 2016, for 5 years, he was underwriter. He is still, I understand, in Singapore. And now he's been relocating to London office after May, where he will be the underwriter for many places, Canada, South America, and also Middle East. So it's good, but because now you are going to already be participating in Latin American world and the discussions we are having in our country. Please, thank you, and the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Camila, and first of all, good evening, everyone from Singapore, and thank you to Maria and Commander Nogueira for excellent presentations. In terms of my presentation, I'm going to be looking at the impact of environmental factors on the cost and complexity of P&I claims. So if we go to the next slide, please. So in terms of how I'll be doing this, first of all, I'm going to look at the P&I Club and International Group system before moving on to look at the International Group Large Casualty Subcommittee and their focus on managing the cost of large casualties, before looking at some of the key cost drivers identified by them in managing these claims. So what is P&I? And as I'm sure many people will be aware, attending this webinar, P&I insurance is third-party liability insurance for ship owners, operators, and charterers. The cover is provided by P&I clubs and principally by to 13 clubs that comprise the international group, who insure about 90% of the world fleet. And if you look on the slide there, you can see the 13 clubs, who I'm sure many of whom will be very recognizable to you in Brazil. The only other point to really note here is that P&I clubs are mutuals and not commercial insurers. And that's really important because unlike our commercial counterparts, P&I clubs are not underwriting for a profit. They're owned by the ship owner members, and the target really is to break even rather than to achieve a profit for third-party capital providers, such as in the commercial market. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So this slide just looks a little more deeply at what is covered by P&I clubs. And you can see the main headers of cover there on the left-hand side. In terms of frequency, the most common claims are generally personal injury and cargo claims. But in terms of the cost of claims, wreck removal and oil pollution generally lead to some of the most expensive claims that we see in the international group. And you can see at the bottom there, fees in these large casualties can be extremely high. So in one of the largest casualties the international group has covered, the fees were in excess of $60 million. So in the big casualties, fees is also a fairly costly header of cover. So if we go on to the next slide, this slide looks in a little more detail at the limits of cover that the international group can provide. As you can see, they are fairly extensive, and there's really 3 points to note on this slide. First of all, the first $10 million of any one claim is retained by the club that's handling the claim, and that's referred to as the individual club retention. The second point is the pool, and you can see that's a layer from 10 to 100 million, and those claims are shared between the 13 clubs in the international group, and each club's contribution to a claim is calculated using a formula that reflects the tonnage, the premium, and also the claims experience of that club in that layer. So the intention is over time, every club puts in what they take out. And thirdly is the general excess of loss, which is from 100 million up to 3.1 billion. This is reinsurance that's bought collectively by the international group. It's the largest marine reinsurance contract in the world. And the other point to note here is in respect of oil pollution claims under the IG cover are sublimited to $1 billion. So that's 1 billion any one event. So if we go on to the next slide now, I'm just going to show you some pictures of some casualties from the group, which have gone through various layers of the cover provided. So first of all, the Vianna, which ran aground on a reef in New Zealand in 2011, at the time was the second largest claim in the history of the international group. The next slide is Concordia, which is still the largest claim to date at $1.5 billion. And then if we go through to the next slide, this is the Golden Ray, which I'm sure people will be aware of, a very big claim currently being handled. And then the next slide, Grande America, which is a big casualty from last year. And then next we have the Wakashio, which I'm sure will be familiar to most people. And then finally, the Kia Trader, which grounds on the reef in the South Pacific a few years ago and was a very complex salvage operation. So moving on to the next slide, we're looking at the large casualty subcommittee, and really this was born out of the Vianna and Costa Concordia claims, which at the time were the two largest claims in the history of the international group. And I think first of all, it's important to ascertain, why is the international group and the clubs interested in large casualties? Well, the first point here is the international group are an inherent part of the system that governs liability and compensation for these very large casualties. There are a series of international legal instruments and conventions that underpin liabilities in this area. So the Nairobi Convention for wreck removal, the CRC Convention for oil pollution, and the Bunker Convention for bunker pollution. Now, although they relate to different things, they do have certain things in common. So, for example, they provide strict liability, compulsory insurance, and also direct action. And it's the P&I clubs from the international group that are currently providing this insurance and also responding to those claims. And secondly, I think equally as importantly, in these very large cases, the costs are very high, and that has a direct impact on the cost of insurance for each member. So it's really in the interests of each club and their members that clubs share learnings from these big casualties in order to mitigate the costs moving forward, because that will hopefully reduce any premium increases for their members. So going on to the next slide now, I'm going to touch on some of the findings from the subcommittee in terms of the challenges that we see from environmental factors that have an impact on the cost and complexity of P&I claims handling. And the first one is fortuities. And what I mean here really are things like the weather, remote locations, availability of salvage equipment, mobilization time, and some of the difficulties associated with that. And you can see on the slide on the bottom right hand side, that's the Vianna 1, which was a wreck removal from Chile a number of years ago. And this is really quite a good example of some of the challenges that we see in some of these cases, insofar as it's in a very remote location in Chile, adverse weather conditions, you can see the snow-capped peaks, and very little availability of salvage equipment locally. So in this particular case, it involved getting kit from India, New Zealand, the arena job there, and also the Salvor's main base in Florida. So a lengthy mobilization, which is a particular concern for the clubs, because mobilization times can significantly drive up costs, and it also requires an elevated level of planning on the part of the Salvors to get this right. And that latter point on Salvors is an issue that possibly may get worse as the salvage industry continues to contract, as it has done over recent years. And I think also the trend in less investment in heavy salvage equipment continues. So it's not always easy to address these factors. Clearly, they're fortuitous, so they are unforeseeable, but there are some mitigations possible. First of all, planning, which I mentioned above in the context of the Underwriting 1. Secondly, data and information. And really what I mean here are things like more sophisticated long-range weather forecasting, insofar as this can support a more favourable contractual risk allocation. Because if the contractor feels more comfortable with the weather risk, they may be inclined to accept more risk into the contract. And the same point applies to tender documentation. Almost all these jobs are based on an invitation to tender for wreck removal, and the clubs will try and provide as comprehensive a suite of information as possible in order to elevate the confidence level of the Salvors, and again, try and get them to be prepared to accept a greater level of risk under the contract, and that obviously mitigates the cost involved for the club. So both of those points really feed into contracting, which ultimately is the club's last line of defence in controlling costs when things go wrong involving these jobs. So we go to the next slide, which is authorities, and by far and away the largest, most significant cost driver in these casualties is the involvement of the authorities. And in the 38 claims that the subcommittee have reviewed over the last 10 years, there were high levels of intervention in most cases. I think firstly, it's important to note here that clearly the authorities would want and need to be involved in large casualties of this nature, given the environmental damage that is often caused, and also the impact on local communities and local industries like fisheries and tourism. So from a P&I perspective, it's really important to try and understand what the authorities' main drivers are, and often that's for a rapid, seamless response, quite often on the back of intense media scrutiny and environmental concerns. So the key really from our perspective is to ensure there's a collaborative relationship with the authorities, where each side can clearly communicate with each other and people aren't sort of drawing lines at an early stage. And one of the main challenges from our perspective can be where we're dealing with situations where there are different authorities with different interests involved. And it can sometimes be challenging to find consensus in these situations. In order to assist with this, the international group has been reaching out to administrations in maritime nations to try and explain the experience that exists across the clubs and also their capability in casualty management. So the aim of this outreach program is to build relationships before a casualty and try to ensure there is a collaborative working relationship. And at the heart of this program is the Memorandum of Understanding in Casualty Management, which really looks at some of the befores and afters of casualties. So the befores would be talking about what the clubs can do, building relationships and identifying lines of communication. And then the afters would be talking about how clubs would respond in the event that there was an incident, so authorities are aware of the process and feel comfortable with that. To date, the UK, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand have all signed up to the MOU, and also in South America, Venezuela, Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay. And a really good example of the effectiveness of the MOUs was seen quite recently in a standard club casualty where there was a fire on board a ship in a port in Australia. And as a result of the relationships that have been built under the MOU, the handler at the club was able to speak to the relevant person in Australia and provide assurance to them that the claim would be handled in the right way and manage the situation so we could get on and do our job as soon as possible. I think the final point to note here with the authorities is from a P&I perspective is sometimes it's the importance of challenging unreasonable requirements. And again, an example of this we've seen in the case we were handling last year, where the authorities mandated bunker removal and also wreck removal. And whilst the club thought bunker removal was a good idea, it thought that it may not be a good idea or necessary to remove the wreck. And in these situations, obviously with appropriate technical input, we would look to engage further with the authorities to try and discuss that further and see if we can come to a different resolution. You can see the reference on the slide to the Nairobi Wreck Removal Convention, and that's really relevant because the convention provides a lot more structure on what constitutes a hazard that is required to be removed. And in the context of my previous point, the convention may give clubs an ability to challenge where the requirements don't quite meet the touchstones for removal. So going on to the next slide. So now looking at a couple of factors that are becoming increasingly prominent from a P&I perspective in handling these casualties, and clearly with quite significant environmental impact. The first is bunker removal. Bunker removal is generally required as a precursor to wreck removal, and what we have seen in these situations is time is generally of the essence in the post-casualty environment, so there is a need to respond quickly. And this really is a factor that we think will continue to be increasingly important as we see an awareness for environmental factors increase, and also a decrease in tolerance for marine pollutants, fueled by increasing technical capability. So I think that there is an expectation now that bunkers can be removed from ever more difficult situations. And the result of that is that these operations are costing more money. So from the early 2000s, bunker removal would cost probably in the low millions. Now, and in the case the club handled, the cost of removing the bunkers was in excess of $25 million. So you can see a pretty big increase there in costs. And I think that's really a reflection of bigger ships and also high quantities of bunkers being carried on board those ships. So if we go forward to the next slide, again, this is another issue that is becoming increasingly relevant to clubs and handling these casualties. You can see on the slide that that's the MSC Chitra shedding their containers off Mumbai in India. Thankfully, to date, there hasn't been a major casualty involving one of the largest container ships. And I think there is a general view that will be quite a challenging situation when that does happen. An example of some of the risks that container ships can present occurred quite recently, again in another Standard Club file, where after a fire on board, there was quite a substantial claim, and that claim was broadly split into thirds. So 1/3 cargo removal, 1/3 cargo disposal, and 1/3 cargo claim. And it's really the first two, cargo removal and cargo disposal, that are becoming key issues. And there are topical legal issues to consider in connection with the transboundary movement and disposal of waste. And on this point, transboundary movement of waste, that could be containers, firewater, or even the ship itself. This is regulated by the Basel Convention, and the Basel Convention actually came into force in 1992, but it's only recently that we've seen an increasing focus on it. And this will likely continue, and there will undoubtedly be a stronger focus on ship recycling and dismantling, not just in terms of the legal provisions that surround ship recycling and dismantling, so the Hong Kong Convention, not yet in force, and also the EU regulations, but also corporate social responsibility. And a lot of our members have policies, CSR policies, in relation to what they can accept in terms of recycling. So that there may be a situation where the member cannot accept a more cost-effective solution because of their CSR policies, and that would obviously lead to more costly responses. So moving forward to the summary slides, almost finished. Thank you for sticking with me. So there are some key drivers that really are increasing the cost and complexity of P&I claims, and they are intrinsically linked to the environment and damage therein. The key in terms of response from the club perspective is early engagement. So that's really two ways. First of all, the club engaging with our members to make sure they have emergency response plans, they do drills, they understand the relevant points of contact, because as I mentioned earlier, the key in the post-casualty environment is time, and the quicker we respond, the sooner we can mitigate the losses, both in terms of cost and also to the environment. And then secondly, in terms of the international group, as I mentioned before, the international group outreach program and the MOUs that are now in force with some maritime administrations, I think this is really important insofar as it gives administrations and authorities the confidence that clubs will act in the right way and quickly. And also, I think, allows relationships to be built at an early stage, which is really key in managing these situations. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions now or by email later.
Thank you very much, Edward. Excellent presentation. And now we are going to the questions. I notice here a question very similar, one from Luis Cabral, former insurance from the Transpetro, which is the shipping company of Petrobras. And he posed that in 2019, there was a seminar in Brazil with the International Group of P&Is, IOPC Fund, ITOF, Brazilian authorities, and where it was discussed the advantage to ratify at least the CLC 92, the International Convention by Brazil. And his question is, regarding the updated of the whole process to ratify these conventions by the Brazilian government, the question goes to Wellington Nogueira. Do you have any position from the Brazilian government regarding the development of the ratification of the Brazilian, of these international conventions? And a very similar question was made by Dr. Godofredo Mendes Vianna, asking what about the arrest convention? Before you reply, this is very important for the maritime community, that the Brazilian government really pay attention to the international conventions, and we become part of the international group, if you can say, in terms of conventions. We cannot be completely excluded. We understand we are in a very hard moment of COVID in Brazil. The numbers are extremely high, but despite that, we need to continue with our efforts to ratify some international conventions. Wellington, the Navy, I know, and you are a leader in this aspect, has been doing their homework and study and giving all the support regarding the legal issues for the Congress, but we see no, let's say, no development so far. Can you please help us on that?
Mr. Luis Cabral, thank you so much for your question, and I would like to show you my greetings as well. And replying your question, we sent the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on 22 January of 2021, as I said in the slide 19, to our proposal to be a session of the ratification of the CLC 92. And I said as well that we have a problem with package of the conventions that we sent in 2009 to the Congress. And so this package was composed by Wreck Removal Convention, CLC 92, and Fund 71. So in 2015, fund conventions left to be enforced in international level. So the Congress decided to send all the conventions together to be revisited to in our ministries of the Foreign Affairs and at the Navy. So it was stopped. And in 2021, at the beginning of the year, at the early of the year, we sent CLC 92 again to the only this convention in respect to the all works that we have made in such case in Northeast in 2019. So we made a legal opinion reinforcing our position in the ratification of such convention, CLC 92. And we intend, when you have a success for ratification of such convention, to send Fund 92 to the Congress to be approved. And that is it that I have to say to you. And Camila, in respect to the arrest convention, we sent in such convention in 2017 to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we are looking for such convention and how to get update to that convention, but they don't get to find that convention there. I don't know if in the transition of the government, they lose the papers there. But we made a very important work here with Brazilian Association Maritime Law, BDM, and we sent this convention to be appreciated at our Congress, but I think that we didn't get success since now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commander Nogueira. The next question is to Edward. Edward, is there any difference between a green ship and a non-green ship vis-a-vis the P&I Club and the cost of this type of, let's say, coverage by the P&Is? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Camila. It's a really good question. I think from a P&I perspective, in terms of the cost of the insurance, the key factor really that drives the price is first of all the vessel type, and then really the claims trends of certain vessel types in combination with the Mendes terms of entry and loss records. So really, in short, at the moment, there is no difference in premium for a green vessel versus a non-green vessel, primarily because there is no discernible change in the claims trends. But I'm sure, you know, as more green vessels come on risk, and maybe if we start to see a trend, that there may become a difference. But at the moment, no, there is no difference in terms of premium at this stage.
Thank you. Commander Wellington, you explained to us all the situation on the investigations about the pollution, and our question, are the investigations finished, or we still have some developments to be heard?
Yes, very good questions. Everyone likes to know about it. The investigations are not over. After ending the works carried out by GAA, an environment administrative inquiry was sent to the federal policy to continue the investigations on a criminal level. And choose the investigation remain being implemented by that agency. And the Navy has been given support to them to analyze some documents that, because they are very technical, and maybe we will have an announcement of a federal policy in next upcoming. Okay, so yes, in your questions, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And since we are talking about pollution, Edward, can you clarify to us what the P&I clubs have been doing to prevent pollution or to reduce the pollutions in terms of ship owners' requirements and things like that, or training? Can you please expand on that? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Camila. I think the first thing on this point really is ITOF, insofar as all vessels entering into the clubs are automatically enrolled in ITOF, who obviously play a key role in responding to oil pollution incidents. Also, under the blue card regimes, the clubs have a direct liability for things like oil pollution from bunkers, and obviously under the CIC Convention for oil carried on board the vessel. So there is a regime in place whereby clubs can pay compensation very quickly. I've mentioned before that the IG outreach program, and again, I really think that's quite key here insofar as building those relationships and having those open communication channels, as well as educating relevant authorities, means that when there is an oil pollution incident, we can respond very quickly and try and mitigate those claims. And then in terms of working with our members, a number of clubs have quite substantial loss prevention teams, and they work quite extensively with members and their technical operations teams on managing the vessels and trying to prevent these issues from occurring. So there's a number of things that the clubs do to try and reduce the oil pollution risk.
Thank you, Edward. And Mr. Wellington, how is the Navy in relation to the green shipping? Are they studying this subject and considering to issue new rules regarding that, considering the IMO and the Poseidonia, let's say, guidelines?
Yes. Very good question, Dr. Camila. And first of all, I would like to present my greetings to Mr. Godofredo as well for making his question. So, and yes, we are developing some programs in this way. So garbage at the sea is one of the biggest obstacles to the economy and the social development of coastal states, and it's our perspective. And so the effects of the garbage has been treating maritime and environment security, negatively affecting fishing, tourism, biological resources, and marine life, and political, economic, physical, and health impact for coastal states and riverside populations as well. So, in addition, the magnitude of the occurrence of debris total in the marine waters has been affecting the safety of navigation. This is the most important, and in a continuous and growing way. In compliance with the actions of to combat the garbage at the sea, foreseen Memorandum 11 of 2012 of the Commander of the Navy, General Director of Navigation established a plan for combating garbage at the sea. Such a plan is called Clean Sea is Life. And so on, relevant actions have been released by Navy, such as implementation of environmental management system in the Navy under DPC supervision, and the VU have been carried out to cleaning beach and waterway underways as well, ecological sailings, and other initiatives within the scope of IMO, and the implementation of a national plan of the combat to the garbage at the sea, contribute to the continuous development of the maritime mentality and the favor of understanding and of importance to prevent marine pollution at the seas. This is our position in respect to the green ship pollution, and we have always been implementing the guidelines of IMO in this respect. We have a good project for being developed in the next future. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Commander Nogueira. We have a question here to Edward. The salvage, it's from Ivan Jäger. The salvage situation with the pollution brings discussions regarding the possible involvement of the whole machinery and the P&I in the event. Would please clarify the possible involvement of such covers?
Yeah, so thanks, Camila. That's a really good question. In terms of how this would play out with whole machinery and P&I, at first, following a casualty, it would be a salvage situation, so that would fall to the whole machinery insurers. Then there would usually be an investigation and the situation would be analysed in order to ascertain whether the ship was a total loss. So if the ship was a total loss, the operation would move from salvage to wreck removal, and at that point in time, obviously wreck removal is a P&I risk, so that would be moved to P&I insurance. If the claim did remain as salvage and not a wreck removal, then the club could still potentially be involved insofar as we would obviously cover personal injury, any cargo claims, any pollution liabilities. There may also be SCOPIC may be invoked, so we might have to pay that. So really the answer is both insurers would be involved. It really depends on the actual scenario and the factors at play.
Thank you so much, Edward. We have so many questions here. I don't know where to start, actually. What about this one? I think everybody is curious about the recent Suez casualty. And this is from Jatil Lorenzo, from MSC. The recent Suez casualty has brought a huge impact on the shipping community and to the overall market. How P&I clubs may suggest a preventive actions for avoiding situations like that? I believe this is for you, Edward, again.
Sorry, could you repeat the question, Camila?
The question is from Jatil Lorenzo, from MSC. The recent Suez casualty has brought a huge impact on the shipping community and the overall market. How P&I clubs may suggest a preventive action for avoiding situations like that? I have the same question as him, because now we are all worried that any vessel can be, you know, stuck in a Suez Channel if it's a very large vessel. So,
yeah, no, I mean, it's a good question. I think at this stage, it's very difficult to say because we're not aware of all the facts. So I can't really comment in terms of how we could prevent something happening again. In terms of how the clubs will look to respond, I think that obviously our loss prevention teams will undoubtedly be working with our members to try and help them where required. But it's very difficult to say at the moment, I think, on what kind of action we can take to avoid the situation because we don't really know all the facts.
okay, thank you. Unfortunately, time is finishing. It goes very fast when we are in a nice conversation. We don't see the time passing, but we have to finalize. So I don't know if any of you would like to have any final words. Commander Wellington, Nogueira, any final words?
I just only like to thank you, Camila, and Kincaid team for the invitation, and it was a very important webinar for everyone because the ISOs are very, very important and discussed around the world nowadays currently. Thank you so much. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you. Edward?
Yeah, thank you, Camila. Well, thank you very, very much to you for inviting me to speak at this great event in Brazil. And really just P&I clubs are there to help our members. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to get in contact and we can help with any insurance related queries.
Thank you so much, all of you. It was fantastic. I really enjoy. I think we made a very good first webinar with P&I clubs. The topic, I think, is one of the best because it's something we believe is the future in the shipping industry, how we are going to be sustainable in our industry. So thank you so much for all the time you spent with us. And I also would like to thank the public who was here. We had about 100 people. So I believe nowadays with so many webinars around the world, it's fantastic that we were able to attract so many people. And we have also to invite all the public and yourselves, of course, for our next webinar that will be at the end of May. We haven't chosen yet the subject, and I will leave here 2 options, and maybe you can help us to decide the next subject. We were considering related to technology, the cyber attacks, which are quite common nowadays, and how we can prevent that in the future. And also something related to digital BLs and how the technology is influencing in the shipping industry. And another point will be casualties, general casualties that we see that still remains happening, even though with all the technology, we still have accidents with the vessel. So could be also another subject. To have the vote from the public and from yourselves would also help us to decide which is the best subject. Many thanks and for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful Thursday. And Edwards, my special thanks for you because I think it's quite midnight in Singapore. So we have someone from Singapore, someone from Copenhagen, and Mr. Wellington and myself, we are very comfortable here in the morning in Brazil. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.